This past weekend, I've had a lot of time to think while traveling back home to Peoria from Nashville. And one of the things I realized on my drive was that I'm not really sure which budget GPU I would recommend to shoppers this holiday season. It's been a while since I've checked, and so out of curiosity, I went to eBay to see what the usual suspects' prices were on the used market. And yeah, I really didn't like what I saw. In fact, this led me down a rabbit hole looking at the latest prices on multiple websites and rounding the wagons with distributors and sources that I have connected to AMD and Nvidia to just try to make sense of what's going on with the supply chain, but not just to yell at the sky, but to help my fans make an informed decision about what they can expect to buy this holiday season. And believe me, I'm aware you guys want every little morsel of an update you can get every day if possible. Understand how many of you are desperate to get the latest gaming hardware. Any cursory look at the comment sections will see people incredibly frustrated. However, I have to say that the more frustrated or desperate people get for information, the more impetus is on people reporting information to not give in to the tendency to just give the people what they want or play into anger. That's not really helping anybody in the long run. And I say this because I feel the need to point out that a lot of tech tubers are, in my opinion, irresponsibly drawing giant conclusions after talking to just a handful of distributors or AIBs in a single country. They're just kind of yelling at the sky, and well, you might like typing yeah in the comments. Is that really helping you? So I've taken my time to really get a look at the full picture. Like I did with that Ultimate Play article, I could have just rushed out Nvidia stock gone at launch, but the greater story was the important part. And that greater story included specific information like telling you not to bother trying to get a Founders Edition on launch day because there practically were none, and that waiting for cards to drop to MSRP was a fool's errand. Nvidia is manipulating the market to keep prices above MSRP because they literally cannot afford to sell these cards at their fake MSRP due to how expensive it is to produce these unstable and power-hungry 8nm devices. A tech tuber who says these cards will sell out on launch day isn't telling you anything you shouldn't already know. All cards sell out on launch day. Duh. I am not going to just throw obvious facts at you and act like I got something right. I actually want to tell you what's going on in the background before I say my final opinions on what gaming devices you should buy this holiday season. So yeah, let's get into that. And I will start with RDNA 2 first. And that is to say, I have nothing to change about my statements on RDNA 2 availability at this time. RDNA 2 did not have a paper launch. It just had spotty deliveries to different distributors. It really shouldn't surprise anybody that brick and mortar stores may have had less stock during the greatest spike in the current pandemic this year. You don't think AMD might prioritize the biggest online retailers like Amazon, Newegg, and of course their own store? They did. And if you went there, you could have gotten a card. And I know several people that did, unlike Nvidia, on their launch. Furthermore, most of RDNA 2's ASIC deliveries are to AIB non-reference cards, which should start arriving about a day or two after this video goes live, and I'm told that there will be continued daily or every other day deliveries of Big Navi cards throughout the rest of this quarter. I stand by my statement. By the end of quarter 4, AMD will have shipped more of Navi 21 than Nvidia has shipped of GA 102. So again, you can yell at the sky and call AMD evil, or you can listen to me, take my advice, and actually have a chance of getting this graphics card if you want one. Having said that, you should pay attention if you want a high-end card by looking for restocks of Big Navi. They're not going to supply remotely enough to satisfy demand, which is what I've said for months, that these cards, all cards this fall, will be hard to get. The fact of the matter is, during the second wave of COVID, people are going to stay inside, and a lot of people are going to stay inside by themselves. Look, now is the perfect winter to catch up on gaming, and everyone's come to that conclusion. So everyone's trying to get the latest gaming devices. Look online mostly. Brick and mortar stores are somewhat being shafted. I mean, Sony said this themselves, for example. But just know it's not going to be easy. And then moving back over to Nvidia, well, yes, Nvidia literally shipped almost no cards the first month of the launch of Ampere. Their cards are showing up in stores now. This is almost uniform across every distributor I've spoken to that availability is massively improving. Surprise, surprise, right around when AMD's launching their competition, just as I said they would. In fact, I'm starting to see a lot of people in the comments and my own Discord say 3080s showed up on Newegg or Best Buy and they were able to get one. So not only should you probably be refreshing for AMD cards, but also Nvidia, whether it's the 3090, which has its availability higher than expected, to be honest, the 3080, the 3070, or the soon-to-be-released 3060 Ti, which I am told the 3060 Ti will have a full, proper launch with restocked availability throughout the next few months, unlike every other Ampere card launch so far, besides, I guess, kind of the 3070. Having said that about, I guess what we will say is increased Ampere availability, I have to say that it's abundantly clear to me that Nvidia is playing this market, manipulating the prices of their cards as much as possible to make sure the street price stays above MSRP as much as possible. And new information has come to light that a lot of how they're doing this is by redirecting supply of some of their Ampere dies to mining firms. And this is worth pointing out. This is now verified from analysis of Nvidia's latest earnings that they've been shipping a significant portion of their cards directly to mining firms. And it's worth pointing out, these mining firms write their own BIOSes, drivers, and commission their own coolers. They only really need the dies and to buy the GDR6 or GDR6X to make their mining variants of these Ampere cards. In other words, Nvidia is it's not like Asus, right, is directly shipping these cards to miners, and that's causing the problem, although sometimes it wouldn't surprise me if they were. No, the problem is literally Nvidia is only providing these BOM kits to the AIBs when they see that demand is outstripping supply, so the price stays high, and then once it starts to catch up, they redirect cards over to the miners because they'll just get money from them. And again, it's because Nvidia cannot make a decent profit unless these prices stay above MSRP. Honestly, this coming to light of how much of the proportion of Ampere has been sold to mining firms explains the disconnect between the shipment numbers I know are correct and then the weird and inconsistent delivery numbers. This is how Nvidia is further controlling the price. This is why there's been some inconsistencies in deliveries versus shipments. And I don't know what else to say except that it's really shady and Nvidia clearly doesn't give a flying fuck about gamers. Probably because they know gamers will just buy their cards no matter what. Actually, in my opinion, it's kind of funny how Nvidia seems to be using miners to keep sales of their Ampere cards, which underperformed expectations in performance at high levels of sales in the exact same way AMD kind of did with Vega. Ampere really is Nvidia's Vega moment. And, well, now we're getting on to, manipulation in AMD. I've got some new information. It's some good news and some bad news when it comes to if AMD is just going to do the same thing Nvidia is doing. And let me just cut to the chase. I don't have a full list of every AIB model of every version of the 6800, 6800 XT, and 6900 XT, eventually AIB models that will be coming out, but all evidence points to AIBs marking up the non-reference designs in a similar way to what they did with Ampere. Now, there are some distinct differences between what's going on with Radeon and what happened with Nvidia Ampere in the Ultimate Play. The big differences are this. Ampere requires really expensive boards, power delivery and cooling to tame the I would argue unstable and at the very least power hungry 8 nanometer Ampere cards. Maybe they're getting the dies cheaper per square millimeter from Samsung than they would get from TSMC, but the surrounding components in the graphics card make it much more expensive to produce than really any of Nvidia's previous generations. You know, if Nvidia sells Ampere cards at MSRP, they're making 10 to 20% profits. It's like a third of the profits they usually want to make. And so they're kind of making AIBs play ball with price manipulation so they can make the money they need to make. AMD's not doing that. AMD's making big old fat profit margins even at their MSRP, unlike Nvidia. And AMD's actually going to keep producing reference cards in decent numbers, not huge, but decent numbers for a few months. Again, that also differs from Nvidia, but AMD isn't really controlling their AIBs at all. And if you're Asus, well, you see no reason why you would undercut your Ampere graphics models, especially when Nvidia's completely screwed with your earnings for Q4, you know, redirecting kits you thought you were going to get to sell to gamers to mining firms. And so AIBs are trying to make up for this, based on what I am told, by making absurd profit margins on AMD's Big Navi graphics cards. I hope this doesn't turn out to be true, but that's what I'm hearing, that you could see 6800s close to $700, that you could see 6800 XTs close to $800. I don't have the full set of information, so I'm not going to double down on this, but I'm hearing whispers of this, and to be honest, I'm telling you because you've been warned when these cards start showing up on Newegg that you might see a bit of a price shock. And I just think it could be true, even though I am not 100% sure, because I don't know why AIBs wouldn't do this. And at the end of the day, this is to a certain extent out of AMD's hands. They are producing, not in high numbers, but in notable numbers, reference models, and they will be sold from their website at MSRP, unlike Nvidia, who never really intends to sell any real amount of their cards at MSRP. But I just don't know that it's enough downward pressure to prevent the majority of Big Navi cards from being priced above what we were expecting them to be priced at. It's just competition, and if Nvidia is pricing their cards, you know, if in reality the 3080 is 800, AIBs see no reason to sell the 6800 XT for less than 750. They just don't see why they would do that. So all I can say is I hope AMD increases production of the reference models for more downward pressure, but it's somewhat out of their hands. It's up to AIBs, and AIBs are just kind of going along with price fixing. I mean, actually, in fact, I've been told that AMD went out of their way to nerf mining performance in RDNA 2, and that they truly do want gamers to buy RDNA 2. Look, AMD needs gamer market share. They're competitive in the high end for the first time in like 5 years. So AMD's going to do everything they can, but some of it's out of their hands, and AIBs are just trying to make as much money as possible. But then again, I guess I just can't blame them when people paid $800 for an 8 gigabyte 2080, $1,200 for an 11 gigabyte 2080 Ti. In many ways, this is the future gamers paid for. You asked for it. Here's your future. Here's how expensive graphics cards are now. The only way to stop it is by not playing the game, right? Don't hate the player, hate the game. You've got to stop the game from being played this way for prices to ever come back down, which gets me to my final recommendations for what you should buy this holiday season. So yeah, before I get to my recommendations, let me just summarize what's going on. Nvidia is manipulating the supply of their cards by diverting some of the supply to mining firms anytime supply catches up with demand. And so Nvidia will be trying for as long as possible, as hard as possible, to keep their street prices far above MSRP. And I don't see them not doing that unless they start losing significant gaming market share in the desktop. But the fact of the matter is AIBs are mad at Nvidia for making them make smaller margins, for diverting stock away from them. And so a lot of them are just going to try to make as much profit as possible on the other side with AMD cards. And so prices are just up. Supply is here. Ampere is being supplied more to gamers than before to a certain extent, although not as much as you would ever really need to satisfy demand. And AMD will be supplying a decent amount of cards, but again, at elevated prices. So the fact of the matter is, you're able to buy cards, but they're not going to be as cheap as you want them to be all holiday season. And so the overall advice would be to just buy used, right? Well, when I looked at the used market, I was frankly appalled at what I saw. RTX 3060s, these are 2-year-old cards with 6 gigabytes being sold for what they were new years ago. This is ridiculous. Don't buy a $350 used 2060. I would not buy Vega 56 for more than $200. Well, everything's just out of whack. You know, I wouldn't buy a $600 2080 Ti either. These are old cards that have been heavily used, guys. I wouldn't buy them for anywhere near the price of a new card. And so I guess my best advice is just try as hard as you can to get, I guess, whatever, right, at this point, Ampere or RDNA 2 at MSRP, or the one thing I did find is used 1070s for around $200, which would outperform the 5500 XT and probably, yeah, so for $200 a used 1070 is fine, but again, this is a up to 4-year-old card. Do not pay more than like $230 for a used 1070. Who knows how long that will last in your system before breaking. And that just leaves you with basically the 5500 XT for $200, or maybe the 5600 XT for about $280. If you can get that, I think it's a decent placeholder card. You know, at $280, the 5600 XT is cheaper than those used 2060s. It'll last you, you know, with like less than half the price of Big Navi for a little less than half the performance. So it's not completely out of whack, but unfortunately, that's the best advice I can give, and that just tells you how bad things are. If the best card I can recommend new for the money right now, assuming you can't get some of the newest stuff at MSRP, which you probably can't, is the 5500 XT, which was just a more efficient RX 590 released years later for RX 580 prices. The 5500 XT was never that interesting, and the fact that it's like one of the only cards not crazy marked up right now just tells you now is not the year to build, right? I mean, at this point, I would recommend trying to get a PlayStation 5, except that we all know you probably can't, as they're completely back ordered despite shipping millions of them already. It's just, when I look at the prices of components this year in late 2020, the unprecedented demand, everything seems more expensive than when I built my desktop a year ago. So I think there's just some times where you go, maybe now isn't the time to buy. Look, if you can do it, if you can get a 5600X around MSRP, a decently priced X570 motherboard, and then, you know, get a 6800 for $580 or a 6800 XT for $700 or less. Or even like I've seen a couple people get 3080s for under $700. If at those prices, sure, that's what I would be trying to do. I would be trying to get a hold of those over the next couple months. But I wouldn't be making myself build now, because it is a bad time to build. It's just a bad time to build. And at the end of the day, there's like, what, a handful of exclusives on the PS5, but otherwise, you're probably just playing the same games you were already playing, and if you already have the decent desktop, it's going to run them better than any of these consoles in backwards compatibility mode anyway. So I would just try to make do with that, and look, I know like Cyberpunk's coming out and you want to max it out, well then just try to get the newest stuff at a reasonable price, but don't give in to scalpers, and don't sell all of your stuff right now to build a new PC. It was, look, if you sold the 2080 Ti for over $1,000, that was a good move. But at this point, I wouldn't sell one for $600. I would just hold on to what I have until I can actually get a hold of something. Things will improve by March, and there will be plenty of opportunities. As I've told you in this video, though prices are being manipulated, there will be multiple opportunities to get things at reasonable prices. You're just going to have to keep your ear to the rail and look for it. And it just might take a while. So that's the unfortunate conclusion. I guess get a new 5500 XT if you can get one under 200, or a used 1070 for 200. Outside of that, I think this is just the winter to make do with what you have. And just remember that it's not all about the graphics. Hopefully, you're playing games because they're actually fun to play. And yeah, I guess that's really all I've got to say about this in this video. It's not the happiest conclusion, but it is my honest one after talking to dozens of sources over the past couple of weeks instead of rushing out some opinion and yelling at the sky that AMD's evil. So hopefully you found this information useful. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel, ringing the bell button, and sharing this video and other videos. And remember, like for instance, follow me on Twitter. I've been dropping a lot of not so subtle hints about the PlayStation 5 exclusives and Alder Lake and other little mini leaks that weren't big enough to go into video. So follow me on Twitter. Of course, look out for the new Broken Silicon that will drop, well, tomorrow probably for patrons, or of course in the free feeds right before Thanksgiving. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. Have a great Thanksgiving.